Sometimes the truth hides in the quietest corners. Ethan Parker whispered to himself as he stepped onto the observation deck of the outer station. The hum of the reactor vibrating through the floor beneath his boots, lights flickering intermittently, as if the station itself were taking hesitant breaths. Outside, the swirling plasma storms painted the black void with streaks of electric blue and violet, reflecting off his visor and casting long, distorted shadows across the metallic walls, and he could feel the weight of isolation pressing against him, every sound magnified, every shadow a potential threat or revelation, when a sudden movement above the hatch drew his gaze. A figure, angular and graceful, descended slowly, the glow of neon light tracing the curves of her armor, her face hidden behind a sleek, reflective mask that caught and refracted the storm's colors like a prism, and Ethan froze, heart thumping, unsure whether to step back or forward, drawn by an inexplicable pull of curiosity and urgency. He reached instinctively for his toolkit, though he had no plan other than to survive and understand. The air thick with the metallic scent of the station, the low hum of energy from the plasma conduits blending with his own quickened breath, and as she landed lightly, almost floating, her movements deliberate, he noticed the small, precise adjustments of her limbs, the way her fingers flexed over delicate instruments attached to her suit, and in that moment, the station seemed to shrink, time compressing around them, the distant stars blurred by the storm, the hum and flicker and hiss creating a rhythm that matched the beat of his pulse. And though she said nothing, her eyes, visible through a subtle opening in the mask, glimmered with awareness and intelligence, piercing through the uncertainty and fear that anchored him to the deck. Ethan's hands hovered over her gear, unsure whether to touch or retreat, but compelled by a responsibility he could not name, a need to act, to bridge the silence between worlds. And as he stepped closer, guided by the faint warmth radiating from her, the storm's wild chaos framing them like a painting, he realized that this encounter was the threshold of something larger, a revelation that might shake everything humanity had known, and even in the absence of sound, the weight of expectation, curiosity, and an unspoken bond hung thick in the air, binding them in the moment, as if the entire universe had paused to watch, and Ethan, feeling the gravity of discovery, took a measured breath, ready to cross the line between observer and participant, knowing that the next gesture, the next choice, could unravel centuries of misconception in ways both delicate and irreversible. The hum of the station settled into a steady rhythm, a faint vibration under Ethan Parker's feet that mirrored the careful pace of his heartbeat, and he moved toward the central control panel, each step measured, deliberate, aware of every metallic echo in the narrow corridor, while Lyra Veyra followed silently, her presence an unspoken question, the soft glow of her suit reflecting off the polished surfaces, illuminating faint traces of her alien design and intricate markings that seemed to shift subtly under the flickering lights, and Ethan could not tear his eyes away from the delicate patterns as he reached for the terminal, fingers brushing the cool metal, his gaze flicking to Lyra for reassurance, though none was needed, because her posture suggested an odd patience, a willingness to allow him to navigate the unknown. And as he adjusted the settings to stabilize the station's energy flows, the plasma conduits thrummed in response, sending faint pulses of light along the walls, casting both of them in alternating shadows and brilliance. And in the quiet, Ethan caught himself noticing the way her eyes shifted, tracking each motion, calculating, analyzing. And yet there was a softness in the curve of her brow, a hint of wonder beneath the mask that made the tension in his chest ease slightly, the enormity of the moment tempered by the fragile connection that had formed between them. And Lyra, for her part, tilted her head, observing the human with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, her hands hovering over her own equipment, ready to intervene but holding back, allowing him the space to act, to show that despite the chaos of the storm outside and the unpredictability of the station, there existed a reliability in human choices that could be counted on, and Ethan, feeling the weight of trust and the invisible tether between them, activated the sequence, watching as energy stabilized in the conduits, lights growing steadier, the hum settling into a steady, calming pulse that seemed almost alive. reflecting their synchronized breathing, their awareness of the precarious balance maintained through careful attention and quiet cooperation. And in that suspended moment, they shared a glance that needed no words, a silent acknowledgement of the limits they each respected and the possibilities they had yet to explore, while the storm outside raged on, distant arcs of plasma illuminating the observation windows, casting patterns of light across their faces, revealing emotion and thought in subtle flickers. And Ethan felt a pulse of anticipation, a sense that this quiet coordination, this moment of shared purpose, was the precursor to something larger, something beyond calculation or design, and Lyra's slight nod, barely perceptible, conveyed the same awareness, the understanding that human intuition, measured, deliberate, and sometimes hesitant, could intersect with alien perception in ways that might reveal truths neither could anticipate. And as they stood together in the center of the station, framed by the glow of stabilized energy and the chaos beyond, a connection solidified, unspoken yet undeniable, a fragile bridge between two worlds. And Ethan, heart steady now, allowed himself a fleeting thought that perhaps this collaboration, this careful alignment of attention and action, was the first step toward uncovering secrets long hidden, all while the station thrummed around them, alive with potential, waiting to reveal what lay ahead. The soft glow from the station's panels illuminated Ethan Parker's face as he adjusted a dial, the hum of the energy conduit steady and comforting, and he felt the rhythm of the station sync with his own pulse, a quiet reassurance after the uncertainty of the storm. Lyra Veyra stood a few feet away, mask reflecting the subtle light, her posture calm yet alert, fingers tracing the contours of her equipment with precise care. And although she spoke no words, the tilt of her head and the slight movement of her shoulders conveyed curiosity, assessment, and a tentative trust that had begun to grow between them. And as Ethan reached to check another sequence on the console, he caught the glint of her eyes through the mask's opening, eyes that held both intelligence and a restrained intensity, pulling his focus from the task at hand, reminding him that their connection was more than mere proximity. It was awareness, shared space, and silent communication in a world where every movement could signal danger or understanding. And the station itself seemed to acknowledge their coordination, lights dimming and brightening in soft pulses, the air carrying a faint electric scent, the vibration under their feet a gentle reminder that they were part of a larger system, dependent on attention and care. And Ethan adjusted a lever, listening to the subtle change in hum, feeling a sense of accomplishment as the energy flow stabilized, a small triumph that was both practical and symbolic, demonstrating that through deliberate action and observation, balance could be maintained even in a volatile environment. And Lyra's eyes widened slightly, a shadow of a smile tracing her features, a recognition of the human ability to adapt and influence. And Ethan, sensing the shift, allowed himself a brief moment to observe her more closely, noting the elegance in the lines of her suit, the faint shimmer along the edges that responded to the station's light, the subtle nuances that made her presence both otherworldly and tangible. And as they moved in tandem toward the observation window, the storm outside painted the cosmos with streaks of vibrant color, reflections bouncing across their faces, emphasizing expressions of focus, wonder, and connection. And in that shared glance, Ethan felt the depth of understanding, bridging their worlds, an unspoken acknowledgement that the cooperation, attentiveness, and silent communication they had nurtured in these hours had built a foundation for what might come next. And as the plasma arcs outside flared and receded, casting alternating shadows and highlights across the deck, both stood together, poised on the cusp of revelation, each breath synchronized with the other, each movement measured and deliberate, the station alive around them. And Ethan, feeling the weight and promise of the moment, reached out slowly, intentionally, toward a control panel that might unlock a deeper truth, aware that Lyra's observation and subtle guidance were an integral part of the process. A partnership formed in quiet focus and mutual respect, as the distant stars glimmered through the reinforced windows, reminding them both that the universe was vast, full of hidden complexity, and that the journey they had begun together had only just started. The soft hum of the station settled into a steady background as Ethan Parker adjusted the monitors, the subtle light reflecting across the polished metal panels and highlighting the faint streaks of color from the plasma storm outside. And he could feel the vibrations under his feet syncing with the gentle pulse of the conduits, a rhythm that seemed almost alive, guiding his hands as he calibrated the energy flow. Lyra Veyra moved silently beside him, the slight tilt of her head and the careful positioning of her feet signaling observation and readiness, her mask catching reflections that painted abstract patterns across the deck, while her eyes, visible through a narrow visor, conveyed a mixture of curiosity, contemplation, and restrained anticipation, and Ethan, noticing these subtle cues, responded instinctively, adjusting a lever and monitoring the changes. The lights flickering in tandem with the slight variations of energy, casting both of them in alternating shadows and highlights that emphasized the careful choreography of their movements. And as the storm outside intensified, arcs of blue and violet plasma streaking across the observation windows, they shared a glance, an unspoken acknowledgement of the synchronization between human intuition and alien perception, and Ethan felt a sense of quiet reassurance, knowing that their cooperation had achieved stability for now, even as the station groaned softly in response to external turbulence. He reached out to manipulate a series of delicate controls, the tactile feedback grounding him, every click and hum reinforcing the precision of their actions, and Lyra mirrored his attentiveness, adjusting a component with minute movements that required focus and subtlety, their actions weaving together in a silent conversation of motion and intent. And in the ambient glow of the station, the details of her armor and the iridescent patterns along its surface caught his attention, the shifting colors responding to the lighting as if communicating, and he realized that in these moments, understanding was built not through words but through careful observation, shared awareness, and the trust they extended to one another without speaking. And as they approached the main console, a faint vibration ran through the deck, the hum deepening, resonating with the connection between them, and Ethan glanced at her, catching the smallest change in expression, the slightest lift of her brow, and knew that she was aware of the significance of their actions, that this silent collaboration was not only maintaining the station, but also forging a bridge of comprehension between worlds, while the storm's light danced across their faces, painting them with ephemeral highlights and shadows that marked each subtle motion, and the quiet, deliberate exchange of focus, movement, and attention underscored the unspoken understanding that the next decisions, though measured and precise, might open doors to revelations long hidden, a fragile interplay of trust, intelligence, and intuition holding them steady as the station breathed around them, alive with both possibility and uncertainty. The station hummed with a steady pulse, the glow from the energy conduits casting elongated reflections across the metallic floors, and Ethan Parker moved carefully along the corridor, each step measured, the soft click of his boots echoing faintly against the walls, while Lyra Veyra followed with quiet precision, her armor catching the diffused light in subtle patterns that shifted as she adjusted her stance, and though she spoke no words, her gaze held an intensity that matched his focus, a silent dialogue of awareness and trust forming between them. And as they approached the observation deck, the storm outside painted the cosmos in streaks of neon blue and violet, the plasma arcs dancing across the windows, creating fleeting shadows and highlights that emphasized the contours of their faces, the calm determination in Ethan's expression mirrored by the poised attention in Lyra's eyes. And he reached for a secondary console, adjusting a series of delicate levers and switches, feeling the tactile response under his fingers, the hum deepening as the energy flows realigned, a subtle confirmation that the station was stabilizing under their coordinated effort, while Lyra moved beside him with careful deliberation, her hands hovering near her instruments, ready to assist, but allowing Ethan to take the lead, their movements synchronized like a silent dance, each action reinforcing the other. And the air was thick with anticipation, the faint electrical scent, mingling with the recycled atmosphere, a reminder of the fragile balance they maintained. And in that charged quiet, Ethan noticed the smallest flicker in her eyes, a spark of curiosity tempered by calculation, reflecting both the alien complexity She carried an attentive recognition of human reliability, and he responded with a subtle adjustment, a gentle shift that aligned the sequence. The lights pulsing in resonance with their combined focus, and as they paused to observe the results, the storm outside flared, momentarily illuminating every detail of the deck, the metallic surfaces gleaming, the reflections tracing the careful lines of their posture, the quiet intensity of their shared purpose underscored by the rhythmic hum of stabilized energy. And Ethan realized in that moment that trust had grown without words, that the deliberate attention, the silent exchange, and the patient observation had created a bond capable of bridging worlds, and Lyra's slight nod, almost imperceptible, confirmed this understanding, the unspoken acknowledgement that their coordinated presence and focused effort were shaping not only the immediate environment, but also a potential path toward deeper truths, all while the station thrummed steadily around them, alive with possibility and waiting for the next precise movement, the next careful gesture to reveal what had been hidden. And in the shared glance between human and alien, there was a recognition that despite the vastness of space and the differences that defined them, collaboration, attentiveness, and a measured curiosity could illuminate the unknown and create understanding across the void. The gentle hum of stabilized energy flowed through the station, a comforting pulse beneath Ethan Parker's feet as he moved deliberately along the observation deck, eyes scanning every monitor, every conduit, aware of the subtle shifts in light and vibration that spoke volumes about the station's condition. And Lyra Veyra followed with measured steps, her presence a quiet reassurance. The reflective surface of her mask catching the soft glow of the panels and scattering it into a delicate display of colors across the floor and walls. And Ethan, noting her attentiveness, adjusted a series of controls with precise motions, each click and subtle movement sending a ripple of light through the room, while she mirrored his focus, her hands hovering near her own instruments, ready to provide input, but allowing him to lead. Their silent coordination a testament to the growing understanding between human and alien. And as they approached the main viewing window, the storm outside cast shifting neon arcs of blue and violet across the deck, reflections tracing their silhouettes and highlighting the tension and concentration etched into their expressions. And in the quiet that enveloped them, Ethan felt a weight of responsibility mixed with anticipation, recognizing that every adjustment, every careful calibration, was part of a delicate balance that required trust, intuition, and mutual awareness. While Lyra's eyes followed his movements with subtle approval, a silent acknowledgement of his competence and the reliability of human judgment, and the station seemed to respond to their harmony, the hum deepening into a steady resonance that filled the space with a sense of calm and potential. And as Ethan reached for the final sequence of levers, aligning the energy flow with the precision demanded by the system, he felt a fleeting pulse of connection, an awareness that their actions were more than technical necessity. They were a bridge of comprehension, a shared effort that transcended language or species. And Lyra, tilting her head slightly, mirrored his focus, a gesture that communicated trust and curiosity in equal measure. And the storm outside framed their quiet cooperation with bursts of neon light, shadows, stretching and contracting over polished metal and illuminated panels, the interplay of color and movement capturing the fragile elegance of the moment. And Ethan, taking a careful breath, observed how her subtle gestures guided his understanding, how silent observation and deliberate action could create a rhythm that spoke as loudly as words. And in that suspended time, the station alive with energy, the storm painting fleeting patterns across the deck, they existed in a shared understanding. A partnership forged in attention, patience, and quiet respect, a tether between worlds that hinted at the revelations yet to come, the possibilities expanding with each careful motion, every flicker of light, and every synchronized step in the delicate choreography of presence and observation. The station shivered under the distant rumble of the plasma storm, a low vibration that ran through the metal floors and echoed softly against the walls. And Ethan Parker moved with deliberate care, his hands adjusting a series of delicate controls while his eyes remained alert to every subtle change in the readings before him. The gentle pulse of stabilized energy, a steadying rhythm beneath his feet, and Lyra Veyra followed closely. Her movements fluid yet cautious, the reflective surface of her mask scattering faint streaks of neon across the deck. Her eyes visible through the narrow visor, holding an intensity that mirrored his focus and yet carried an alien precision. And as the two of them worked in tandem, the observation windows framed the storm outside in brilliant arcs of violet and electric blue, casting fleeting reflections across their faces that highlighted determination, concentration, and a quiet curiosity. And Ethan, sensing a subtle shift in energy flow, made a calculated adjustment, the console clicking in acknowledgement, while Lyra's fingers hovered near her own instruments, ready to intervene but holding back, a silent trust forming between them, an understanding that their combined attention and deliberate actions could preserve balance in the station. And the air carried a faint electric hum, mingling with the recycled atmosphere, a tangible reminder of the fragile equilibrium they maintained. And as he manipulated a series of final sequences, aligning conduits and checking stabilizers, the subtle glint in Lyra's eyes conveyed a mix of approval and anticipation, a recognition that human intuition and patience had achieved more than expected. And Ethan, catching the faintest arc of expression in her features, felt the weight of responsibility but also the quiet thrill of shared discovery, a moment where preparation and attention had led to accomplishment. And the storm outside painted the deck in fleeting patterns of light and shadow, emphasizing the interplay of motion and stillness, focus and observation, while the low hum of energy resonated through the station like a heartbeat, connecting them in purpose and intent. And Ethan adjusted a final dial, the light on the console confirming proper alignment, and in that instant, he realized the importance of their coordinated efforts, how silent cooperation, patience, and careful observation had created a bridge between worlds. And Lyra, inclining her head slightly, conveyed the same recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement that their shared attention, deliberate gestures, and measured movements had not only stabilized the station, but had also forged an understanding that transcended language, species, and expectation, the storm outside framing their quiet triumph, reflections dancing across metal and glass. And in the suspended rhythm of that moment, Ethan and Lyra shared the awareness that the next step, the next cautious decision, could illuminate truths long hidden, while the station pulsed steadily around them, alive with potential, waiting for their next careful motion, their next precise act of observation and collaboration. The storm outside had eased into a distant flicker of neon light across the observation windows, casting long, shifting shadows across the deck. And Ethan Parker took a careful step toward the central console, his hands steady, every movement precise, the hum of the stabilized energy resonating beneath his boots, while Lyra Veyra mirrored his motion, her presence deliberate, the soft glow of her suit and the subtle shimmer of her mask reflecting the ambient light. And as Ethan adjusted a sequence on the console, aligning energy conduits with a measured touch, he sensed a change in the station's rhythm, a subtle shift that hinted at an opening, a possibility that had not been apparent before. And Lyra, watching intently, tilted her head, her eyes narrowing in concentration, the faint reflection of neon arcs dancing across her features, communicating both curiosity and anticipation without a word. And Ethan, feeling the weight of their collaboration, reached toward the panel that controlled the visual interface, the tactile sensation grounding him, each lever and button a link to the larger system. And as he engaged the final sequence, a quiet pulse of light traveled along the conduits, illuminating the deck with a soft, ethereal glow, painting their faces in alternating shades of calm and tension. And Lyra, moving closer, allowed her hand to hover near a control, poised yet restrained, a gesture of readiness and trust, while the storm outside reflected in her eyes, flashes of electric blue and violet tracing the contours of her expression, capturing a mixture of wonder, calculation, and tentative recognition of human determination. And Ethan, sensing the precise moment, extended a hand toward the small latch that concealed a critical component, his motion deliberate yet gentle, the air thick with anticipation. And as the cover swung open under his touch, Lyra's eyes widened subtly, the reflective surface of her mask catching a final gleam of neon from the storm, revealing the depth of intelligence and history contained within, and in that suspended moment, the station seemed to pause with them. Every hum, flicker, and vibration attuning to the revelation about to unfold, and Ethan, heart steady yet full of expectancy, felt the connection between them deepen, a silent acknowledgement passing in a glance, that the hours of patient observation, careful adjustments, and unspoken cooperation had brought them to the threshold of understanding. And as he prepared to engage the final interface, a subtle light traced across Lyra's features, her gaze meeting his in a quiet, profound recognition, conveying that the truth they were about to encounter, while delicate and potentially unsettling, was shared, and in the interplay of glow, reflection, and attention, a bridge had formed between human and alien, a link defined not by words but by trust, patience, and the quiet courage to act together. And the storm's remnants outside painted the deck with a final, fleeting tapestry of color, shadows, and light, emphasizing the fragile yet powerful connection that would carry them into the revelation awaiting on the other side. The observation deck was bathed in a soft, steady glow as Ethan Parker stepped forward, fingers hovering over the final controls, the hum of the station resonating beneath him like a heartbeat, and Lyra Veyra stood beside him, the reflective surface of her mask catching and refracting the light into delicate patterns that danced across the walls and floor, her eyes visible through the narrow visor, glimmering with awareness and something deeper, a quiet acknowledgement of shared purpose. And as Ethan gently lifted the last latch, the hidden compartment revealed its contents, intricate panels and devices that seemed impossibly delicate yet exuded a sense of authority and history. And Lyra's gaze followed every movement, tracking the interaction with careful attention, the subtle rise and fall of her chest matching the rhythm of the station's pulse, and Ethan's hands moved deliberately, aligning components, observing readings, adjusting with precision, while Lyra mirrored his focus, ready to assist but holding back, a silent testament to trust and coordination built over hours of careful observation and quiet collaboration. And outside, the storm had faded to distant glimmers of neon light across the void, reflections tracing their silhouettes in a shifting tapestry of color and shadow, emphasizing the intensity and concentration etched across their faces. And as Ethan activated the final sequence, a soft glow spread through the deck, illuminating every panel and surface with a gentle radiance, highlighting the meticulous craftsmanship and complexity of the systems before them. And Lyra's eyes widened slightly, the mask catching the neon remnants of the storm, revealing for a fleeting moment the depth of intelligence and history contained within. And in that suspended time, the station seemed to hold its breath, every hum and pulse in resonance with the significance of the discovery. And Ethan, feeling the weight of responsibility and the quiet thrill of understanding, met Lyra's gaze. And in that single glance, there was recognition, acknowledgement of effort, patience, and insight, a bridge formed between human and alien, a connection built not on words but on attention, careful action, and mutual respect. And as the soft light spread across their faces, highlighting the subtle expressions of focus, curiosity, and shared comprehension, Ethan realized that the hours of meticulous work and quiet observation had brought them to this threshold of revelation. And Lyra, inclining her head slightly, communicated without speech that the understanding gained, the insights revealed, and the connection forged were a shared experience, a testament to the power of cooperation and the human capacity to perceive, act, and understand across differences. And in the reflective calm that followed the storm, with neon light flickering gently across the deck and the hum of stabilized energy resonating in steady rhythm, they stood together, poised at the edge of a discovery that would echo far beyond the station, a quiet yet profound acknowledgement that the journey, patience, and careful attention had unveiled truths long hidden, and that the connection between them, fragile yet resilient, would carry the weight of understanding into whatever lay ahead.